In the spirit of reconciliation, Adobe acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Indigenous Australians. Now it's over to the Adobe Education team.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. As already said, in the spirit of reconciliation, Adobe acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to elders, creators, artists and storytellers, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. I acknowledge the people of the Wurundjeri of the Eastern Kulin Nation, on whose unceded lands I am fortunate to live, work and play with my family. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. And if you want to see where I'm currently talking from you today, it's down here where you can see Woiwurrung. That's the Woiwurrung language group is one of the language groups of the Wurundjeri. So I'm coming to you from Melbourne. This image is by an Australian gentleman named Dave Foster. He's based in New South Wales and he is a typographer and graphic designer. And if you are interested in seeing that wonderful documentation, you can go in and just check through that link there, thefostertype.com/portfolio. And that's a map of Australia that is based around all of the language groups, the Indigenous language groups, including Torres Strait Islands. And you can see up there, we've got Tiwi as well. So welcome to everybody. It's 4 o'clock in Melbourne right now. It's about 38 degrees outside. So we are having very unseasonable early autumn weather here, but very delighted to join you today. So my name is Al Briggs. I am a customer success manager in the Adobe team. My background is I've worked in the education space, primarily in vocational education, or TAFE as it's also known, for over 20 years. So I trained as a graphic designer way back in the day, learning how to use Adobe tools for an industry context. I then moved about 20 years ago into an education space, again, teaching the Adobe software in an education context. And then during the COVID period, moved across into a learning design role where I was, again, focusing on digital literacy and fluency across not just students, but also staff across the entire university. So it is absolutely my pleasure to be with you today. As I said, my background is education. I tend to run my workshops, my webinars, my sessions in the same way as we would a class. So please feel free to interrupt me at any stage. I am doing double duty at the moment, going in and manning the chat and also running the session. So if you do have questions, please feel free to either raise your hand, shout out, put your camera on, say, hey, Al, whatever it happens to be. I'm more than happy to go in and answer it. As I jump through my slides, it's not going to be a slide-heavy event today, and I will apologise in advance for the use of pencils throughout my presentation. I don't know why, but when I was going in, I was creating this inside of Express presentations, and I typed project-based learning in as a prompt because, like a student, sometimes I go with the obvious answer first. And for some reason, it popped up with a picture of a pencil in the first images, and I thought, well, that's kind of a pretty image. And so as you go through this presentation today with me, you will see that there are a lot of pencils. There's no relevance necessarily to it. It's just letting you know you're going to be seeing some pencils. So today's session is talking about project-based learning and authentic assessment and how you can go in and use Adobe Express to create those sorts of outcomes. I don't want to get bogged down in the technical detail or theory behind sort of project-based learning and authentic assessment, other than to just go in and use it as a launching point. What I'll talk to you about is some worked examples that I've been a part of as an educator and as a learning designer. And again, I'm more than happy to open up the floor to all of you to go in and see if you have suggestions or fantastic things that you've worked on or you found work particularly well in context. I will go through using Express and how you can go in and do things like sharing or setting up templates for students, whether they be at the K-12 or higher education level. Again, as I said, my background has been in tertiary education, so that will be the main component of my chat today. But I will obviously be talking about the K-12 space as well. So to get started, project-based learning, what is it and why is it sort of useful? Well, project-based learning, as I'm sure you are aware, focuses on real-world problems. So it's the idea of it's an instructional approach designed to give students the opportunity to develop knowledge and skills through engaging projects set around challenges and problems that they may face in the real world. So it's more than just doing a project the way that, say, I maybe used to go in and do a project when I was at school. The idea is about investigating and responding to an authentic, engaging and complex problem or challenge with some deep and sustained attention. My wife is a primary school principal, so she and I have multiple conversations about project-based learning, authentic assessment, and the crossovers, which are really interesting between that K-12 space and into the TAFE space, but particularly at that primary, so the K-6, and again at that technical and further education sort of level. So when we're talking about some of the key attributes, and again, these are not necessarily hard and fast rules, but they are attributes that are fairly standard when you're talking about project-based learning. The idea of an extended time frame. So it's not just a simple little project that you're doing in a single class or over the period of a week. It might be a little bit more extended. In that vocational education context, it might be something like a capstone project that goes for an entire semester. The idea there is that students have got significant control over the direction and outcomes of their projects, which obviously fosters independence and ownership and generally leads to significantly better engagement across the education journey. A focus and a real key here is on that idea of interdisciplinary approach. So it's not just going in and teaching a discrete unit. And it's something that, again, from a technical and further education perspective, I'm not sure, and I will go in and ask people in the chat to go in and tell me what space they're from, whether it's K-12, K-6, 7-12, higher education, vocational education, or whatever it is, just so that I can get an idea and it doesn't end up just me becoming telling a story about my time as a vocational educator. But yeah, I think the idea of interdisciplinary is really important. We've got Lily's primary, fantastic. Yeah, engaging multiple subject areas and encouraging students to apply that knowledge from various disciplines, because that idea that knowledge is discrete, that it is only applicable to a certain circumstance, is something that we moved away from in education a long time ago. In vocational education, for example, I find very much that because we do a competency-based system where it is these discrete units and these discrete knowledge sets, it can be tricky to go in and come up with an assessment that is going across, because you've got to have mapping and all sorts of bits and pieces. So if there are any other any other TAFE people in here, I feel your pain when it comes to creating these project-based learning outcomes. But the idea is the important thing, right? It's about not just keeping things siloed in maths or science or humanities. It's about the fact that those things interplay, and you know, we are really trying to go in and foster and encourage those new connections that are across discipline for all of our students and obviously for our educators as well. And the final component there is that there's usually some sort of presentation component there, which may be to an audience beyond the classroom. So it might be at a parent-teacher session, or it might be to an industry partner. There's a lot of different sort of ways that can go on and work. When I started putting this together, project-based learning and authentic assessment, to me, always seem very similar. There are a lot of areas of crossover, but there are some quite sort of significant differences in there as well. I'm going to be focusing on the commonality because, again, this is a session that is framed around using Adobe Express, and I want to go in and talk about Adobe Express as the solution, as part of the solution to your problems, as opposed to getting into the weeds in terms of theory and who's saying what about which particular sort of style of learning. So authentic assessment, and again, from that vocational base, this is something that we are very, very strong in the TAFE setting, because we have to be, because TAFE is technical and further education that is framed around industry preparedness, around a student being capable of doing a job in the real world once they've completed that qualification. And so therefore, authentic assessment plays an absolute pivotal role inside of that. The interesting thing that I've found over the last couple of years working with multiple universities across Australia and New Zealand is that a lot of the universities, when you take a look through the strategic plans, are looking at these things. They're looking at skills. And, you know, we've just had the government recently releasing the National Skills Passport. There is a lot of talk around that idea that university graduates, not just TAFE graduates, but university graduates, need to be industry ready. They need to have real world, authentic engagement during that learning process to go in and really assist in that transition out into the workplace. So authentic assessment, you will see time and time again. And I think it's a wonderful thing when you're seeing some really great exemplars, and I would love it if you could share some examples with me. We'll certainly have time in the session to do that, to go in and be focusing on where you're finding some really great uses of project-based learning inside of your learning teaching space. Tim said, in Ontario, the social studies curriculum uses the inquiry process to investigate global issues of political, social, economic, and environmental importance to the global community. And yeah, exactly. So inquiry is very much aligned with that idea of project-based. So if your language of education is inquiry-based, this is the place for you. Authentic assessment also is performance-based. Students are demonstrating an outcome. So it's about how they go in and do it. And that might be going in and building a website, or it might be repairing a piece of machinery, or for nursing staff, you know, for example, it might be that idea of going in and inserting a catheter or something like this. And all of these examples are things that I've worked on with staff, going in and using Adobe Express as a potential solution for these sorts of demonstration activities. Complex and multifaceted is another key component of the authentic assessment, where tasks requiring the integration of various skills and knowledge areas, again, similar to the project-based learning approach. Simulating the complexity of real-world problems, so managing a project and all of the components that go with that. The fact that it's a reflective and iterative process, again, that speaks to the same as with project-based learning, that extended time. It's not just something that you're going to go in and manage to do in 5 minutes. It is something where you do have to go in and think about it. In design thinking, there's a thing called the 2-diamond approach, which is that you come up with an idea, you iterate, you refine the design, and then you re-rinse and go through that process again. And there are multiple different models that go in and look in similar ways, like that idea of coming up with the problem first and then narrowing it down to your solution as you go. The great thing about that idea of the reflective and iterative process is it really solidifies the knowledge in the student's head, because they're having to go in and share ideas. So they're not only exposing their ideas to feedback, but they are also having to feedback on their fellow students' work, and therefore learning additional things, because everybody brings something different to the table in an education setting. And that's a great thing. It also teaches students to be critically self-evaluative. So when they're going in and looking at their own work, they are able to go in and see what is really working well, what can be improved. And it's a really important skill when you are going in and moving out into industry, where you may need to be more autonomous and have to go in and have that critical faculty at the back of your mind all of the time. And again, the really key component here is collaborative. And I think collaborative is one of those things that, again, as an educator, sometimes you can feel is getting away from you a little bit, but people don't tend to work in silos a lot. Tim said, I use the discussion feature in Brightspace by D2L to assess students collaboratively. Yeah, and look, there are multiple ways to go in and do that. It's a really good point that you've raised there, Tim. My experience, again, from education was through Canvas. We used Canvas as our LMS at RMIT University, and particularly during COVID, I used to spend a lot of time going in and creating video feedback for students, and also going in and sharing that feedback in the actual classroom setting. So rather than going in and giving individual feedback, it became much more of a group sort of feature, because I think everybody can learn something from everybody else in that classroom, and that's the real key that I've always had with my education process. So you could see from those couple of slides, there are a lot of sort of crossovers, and I think the key things that come out of this is that whether you're focusing on a project-based learning or an authentic assessment approach or an inquiry-based, the key there is that enhanced engagement and motivation for your students, where you're looking at active and relevant learning, and the critical skills that are required across the board and at all levels. And I think, again, this is where I love talking and working with teachers in the K-12 and particularly the K-6 space, because once you get that foundation set at that level, that becomes part of the learning journey. That becomes part of what a student thinks of as the learning journey. So by the time they're getting into that higher education space, they're already familiar with this process, which means that we're not having to then go in and teach a brand new skill to a potentially reticent or reluctant 19-year-old. We're going in and reinforcing what they've already been doing and putting a different sort of context on it with that specific industry potential focus. And those critical skills that we're talking about are things like critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration and communication, resilience, which is a really huge key word that I see time and again in all of the literature that I read and in all of the conferences that I go to and all of the YouTube and Vimeo clips that I watch. Resilience as a student, resilience as an educator are absolutely key, I think, as we move forward into this absolute madness that is 2025 and beyond. The idea of applying that knowledge and reflecting on the journey really reinforces that deeper understanding. I don't think I ever learnt as much as I did when I started teaching. When I started as a teacher, I didn't realise how much just going in and repeating the information that I knew actually helped my understanding of that material. I know that as a graphic design teacher of 20 years, I'm a significantly better graphic designer now than I was at the start of that teaching journey, simply because of that repetition of information and the fact that going in and repeating that information or presenting it really embeds it deeply to the point that you do become more of an expert in your field. And again, that idea of preparation for future challenges, so 21st century skills like resilience, like the ability to go in and, we talk about digital literacies and digital fluency. Digital fluency is the one that I really sort of focus on, because digital literacy you could attribute to. Literacy means that you can read, fluency means that you can create. So it's that idea of if you are digitally literate, you may know how to go in and use a specific digital tool. You might know how to use Photoshop. If you are digitally fluent, you can translate that acquired knowledge and skill set across into any software application. whether it be Apple's Final Cut Pro, or whether it be another Adobe tool like an Express or something like that. And that literacy component and the fluency component really gets reinforced, I think, by that idea of building a digital confidence. So starting with a simple tool like Adobe Express is going to set that platform for you to go in and soar in whatever capacity you need to soar, because you become used to going in and being able to create those solutions at a simple scale. And therefore, when the more complex interfaces come into play, you're not that thrown off by it, because you already know how to go in and start. There's a thing that we talk about in the design world, which is white pixel fever. Is that idea that when you're staring at a blank screen or a blank piece of paper, there are too many options available and you don't know where to start. And as we'll dig into Express in the next few minutes, the great thing about Express is that there are so many templates and so many guides and things that can help you in that ideation process, in that creation process, get you away from that empty screen that is going to go in and cause all those anxieties and stresses to students and staff alike. As I'm jumping through, if there are any questions, please feel free to go in and jump in and chat with me, because again, this is your webinar. This is not just my webinar going in and talking at you for 45 minutes. So if there are any questions, please feel free. You can either raise your hand and ask the question. If you would rather put it in chat form, I can go in and answer that as well. But there's one quote that I'd like to just sort of unpack a little bit before we start jumping into Express. And this was a review that was done a couple of years ago, actually by my former Vice Chancellor at RMIT, Dr. Martin Bean, Mr. Bean, sorry, we don't call him Doctor. And this was a review that they did of university industry collaboration in teaching and learning. And again, it was focused very much on that higher education space. But when you take a look at it, I think if you go in and remove that word tertiary, I think we're really getting to what we need to be looking at as far as an education system, which is it is critical that we view our education system as a coordinated national platform capable of developing the knowledge, skills and capabilities of learners of the whole population, while also enhancing our economy and society. So the fact that there is no silo, there is no individual, what's happening in K6 should be reflected on what's happening in 712, which should be reflected in what's happening in the tertiary space, and then in that post-tertiary, so in the master's and PhD sort of level stuff. And I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that space. It's why I get excited by tools like Adobe Express being available to all primary school students and secondary students throughout the world. And also the fact that we are partnering with a lot of universities to keep access to those tools once those students get to that tertiary space. I find it incredibly important because we are really, and when I say we, I mean we, the educators of the world, are really looking to make a meaningful connection to that idea of accessibility and equitable learning and access. At the moment, Adobe Express is a tool that is available on all smartphones, from the very latest models through to, as long as it's capable of an internet connection, you can pretty much run it. It is a browser-based, for those who haven't used Adobe Express before, it is a browser-based mobile application. And I'm going to go in and jump into the interface right now. And it looks something like this. You will see a slightly different view if you're going in and looking at it in a K-12 space. So if you, I'm just going to go in and put the link to it in the chat. If you're in the K-12 space, like I said, your interface will be slightly different. You will see less clutter on the home screen. You will have 4 big boxes that go in and talk about creating characters, going in and creating web pages, presentations, etc. But essentially, it's the same interface in the sense that you've got a big blue button in the top left-hand corner. I'm going to go in and just make my screen a little bit bigger so that you guys can see it a little clearer. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Is that sort of a little bit easier to go in and see now, where you've got the navigation stuff sort of sitting there? So if we click on the little blue circle, Adobe Express, I call it the Swiss Army knife of the Adobe tools, where it goes in and takes some of the best of a lot of our tools, things like Photoshop, things like Premiere Pro, things like Illustrator, and puts it all into a single interface that you can go in and use to quickly create. So you've got a bunch of quick actions there, things like removing background. And again, with my background as a graphic designer, I used to teach a class in how to remove the background from an image. It took about 3 hours. It involved going in and selecting the highest contrast channel. Generally, that was the green channel in an RGB image, going in and making an alpha mask, going in and refining the mask using dodge and burn brush. It was a long process. Did the job very, very well, but now it's literally the click of a button. And it's that's one of those things where I just look at and go, man, the number of hours that I spend in industry going in and doing that, the fact that that is now something that can be done in a click of a button makes everybody's life a little bit easier, because it means that you can spend that time focusing on the iterative process, or focusing on refining your design, or going in and extending or expanding out a design solution rather than on that technical detail. And I think that's the bit that excites me, particularly when it comes to things like generative AI technologies inside of an education setting. But you'll see there's also things like converting to GIFs, where you can go in and edit a PDF. If you need to quickly edit a PDF and you don't have access to Acrobat, you can go in and do that through Express. You can go in and trim videos, resize videos, merge videos. You can create animated characters. You can caption videos. So if you're going in and you're putting content together for people with non-English speaking backgrounds, or if you've got students who don't necessarily want to go on camera and film themselves, you can go in and you can get them to go in and do a voiceover for an animated character. We do a bit of that, and I will share a link at the end of the session around our Adobe Creative Educator Level 1 and 2 program. And if you haven't done it, I really recommend that you do it, because it's a great way to introduce yourself to using Adobe Express in an education context. You can also obviously go in and create anything that you want. And as I said, in this session, I'll go in and show you not so much how to go in and do the creation, but more around the idea of how to go in and share it as a resource with your students, or even with your fellow teachers. Are there any questions before we get diving into that? Because again, I'm very aware of the fact that I've been talking for a long time, and everybody's cameras off and mics are off. So I'm hoping that people are still there and getting something from the session. Lily's typing, so we've got proof of life from Lily, and this is a good thing. Now I'm just going to wait for that to finish. No question. Paula said yes. Excellent. We've got thumbs up from Donna and Jean or Jean. Thank you, everyone. Oh, awesome. Okay, great. So I'm going to go in and show you. Oh, and Leanne's clapping me. You're very welcome, Leanne. Thank you very much. Appreciate it very, very much. I'm going to go in and show you. This is a document that I created. So if we jump back just very quickly to our Wednesday webinar, if we're talking about the sort of projects, I was talking again with my wife earlier this week about project-based learning, because their school used to be an IB school, so an international baccalaureate. It's recently changed to the Victorian curriculum. However, they still really have a strong inquiry-based focus. And one of the projects that their students, I think it's in grade 3-4, work on is something called a bee hotel. And the bee hotel is a project where the students are actually going in and creating an environment for bees, as in like the little buzzy bees, things what make honey. And so it covers off on a whole bunch of different areas where they're looking at science and they're looking at maths and they're looking at humanities, because they're researching, the endangered nature of bees at the moment. They're looking at how you can go in and protect them. They're looking at things like temperature variation. So when they're going in and they're thinking about building materials, they're thinking about, we need to make it waterproof. It doesn't need to be in the shade. So there's a whole bunch of thinking that goes into it. And the final outcome is obviously that they create the bee hotel. But the process that they're going through touches upon absolutely everything. They're going in and they're budgeting, they're going in and looking at all sorts of different aspects. The high school that is literally across the road from my wife's school, they have a project where their students, in a project-based learning approach, run the canteen. And so that goes through a whole bunch of different things where they've got to go in and look at economics. They've got to look at balancing books. They've got to look at purchasing supplies or materials. They've got to look at setting up timetabling and managing human resources. And again, it's just a wonderful project. And you sort of think about when students are graduating from high school with that sort of knowledge, not only is it going to help them when they're going out into to finding a job of their own, where they've got that awareness of the fact that a single role is part of a bigger whole. They've also got that idea that when they're going into that higher education, that knowledge isn't discrete, that it is connected in a way, and that they can go in and apply that thinking and that resilience that comes through that creative, large-scale thinking process to go in and come to a sort of an outcome. So just wanted to very quickly flag and highlight that. I'm going to go in and show you a document. So as I said before, if I were going in and just say creating a poster, it might be an information poster that I'm going in and putting together for my class. It might be, if it was, say, for example, the bee hotel, it might be a pitch document. It might be, the idea of going in and saying, this is what we want it to look like and this is why we've done it. So it's a research project, essentially. Again, we've got our blank pixels. We've got blank pixel fever. Oh, no, what am I going to fill it with? I don't know what to fill it with. How am I going to go in and fill it with content? We've got so many templates that we can go in and use through here. So if I go in and just do a search through the templates, I might go in and say hotel project plan. So I've got literally 297 proposals coming up here, and they're all quite dry. And you can see there they've got contract proposals and things like that. Probably not a great sort of starting point for that K-12 space. If I go in and just say, for example, pick out just one at random, that sort of looks a little bit nicer. I go to my posters. I can go to view all. And you can see I've got all of my sort of components there. And so this is where, if you're looking at giving students a bit of structure, so if you're giving them some sort of guidelines or a template to fill in, you can go in and get them to obviously select one of these, but you can also go in and customize or create your own. I'm going to go in and pick just a really simple one, and I'm not going to use one of these ones. I'm going to use one that here's one I selected earlier, and this was just from a template. And so what you can see here is I've got my document. This was started off as a poster. Again, I'm not going to be focusing a lot on that creation process, but to go in and add a page, I literally just go to the bottom of the page there and click on Add Page. In terms of my navigation, when I click on any of these existing elements, so I've got text active, for example, there, you can see I've got this contextual menu that pops up over on the left. You can go in and change the typeface. I can go in and change the style of the type, the layout, how it flows, the position, the opacity. Or I want to animate it. So if I want to go and have a bit of animation in there, so even though it's starting as a poster, it's actually potentially becoming a presentation, or it's becoming a process document. When it comes to going in and sharing that, so if I went in and say, created the basic idea that I wanted with placeholder images, and just as an example to my students, I might go in and even put in some text fields. So if I click on the text tool here, I could go in and click on the little blue button that says add your text. And it's going to pop up one that says add your new text. And I could go in and do something like put some square brackets in and just say your name here, your group here, your class here, whatever it is. And I can go in and add that sort of content somewhere within the page. And then when the students are going in and sharing it, that's where they can go in and put that sort of content. So you can go in and put placeholder images. You can go in and structure it or keep it as loose as you want. When you want to go in and share it, there's a couple of ways you can do that with your students. If you click up in the top right-hand corner here, where it says share, you've got a couple of options there. You can go in and share the actual file with someone. And if you share the file with someone, you can go in and do it where they have a view-only link, or you can go in and give them full access to the document. So if you're doing a group project, for example, you would go in and share it so that multiple people can go in and work inside of that file. But it might be that you want them to only look at the file. So if I click on that view-only link, you can see there, we've got a little chain link icon. It says view-only link. I click on that, and you see here there's a little slider there that says allow others to use this. When I click on that, you'll see it says anyone with a link can use this file as a template. You won't know who has made copies of this file. It's not necessarily a bad thing. What it means is that anybody who has that link can go in and duplicate that. So if you're going and you're putting a template together and you want your students to use it, you can do that. Click on the create link. Give it a second while it goes in and spins up. My internet may be a little slow this afternoon because my son is home and he is playing on the PlayStation 5. So he tends to hold all of my bandwidth between 3:30 and 5, which makes my afternoon presentations a little slow at best. I do apologise in advance for that. But generally, it's only going to take a couple of seconds to go in and generate that. It's not going to, that's fine. I'm happy to go in and just sort of show you how it will work otherwise. But if I'm going in and I'll just go in and generate another one. Oh, no, here we go. Yep, it's done that now. So I can copy that link. And if I paste that into a new browser window, this is the link that you would be able to share. So you could embed it into your learning management system, and you'll see there, this document comes up. I can see that there are various components there, but they can't go in and edit it. But can you see in the top right-hand corner, you've got this remix button. When you click on that, what it's going to do is it's going to open up a brand new copy of that file inside of Adobe Express in the account of the person who is clicking on that remix. So that's the easiest way to go in and share any template that you want the students to go in and use. Yeah, so I click on remix, I get my Adobe Express loading screen, the file opens up, it's going to go in and load the images, and you'll see the file is, as is Adobe's always called untitled, with the date stamp and the exact time. So this was created at 4:41:05, which lets me know I've got 3 minutes and 55 seconds left of this presentation. And that is now owned by the student. And again, they can go in and download it, or they can print it, or they can share it, or they can do whatever they need to go in and do with that particular document. If you've got a web page, you can also do the same thing with a web page. So if you wanted to go in and create a template for students where you might go in and have some headings or subheadings in there that go in and give them a little bit of structure. So it might be an introduction, it might be an abstract, it might be a step-by-step section, it might be a reflection section, an outcomes section. You can go, when you go through your share process, again, you click on share, and when you go to the publish to web, or if it is already published through the publish options, you've got an option there that says allow others to remix. Same thing, it's going in and creating a template, and it means that if I go in and click that, I'll just go in and republish that. Again, it's just going to take a couple of seconds, probably a couple more, because my son is very deep in, I think it's Fortnite. Who knows? Once this project is published, I will show you what happens when I go through that publishing screen. And basically, I will get the same thing. I'll get a little blue button that says remix this, and I can then go in. So if I go in and copy that, new browser window, paste that in. Again, it's going to go in and open up. And because it's actually opening it up in Express, but in the top right-hand corner, the remix this. And if I click on that, it's going to go in and make that copy for me. Now, the other thing that you can go in and take a look at, and Tim's gone in, what a superstar, and put a link to the inquiry process using Adobe Express. Do you mind if I click on that link now, Tim, to go in and share with the rest of the audience while we've got a couple of minutes? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's the idea. I just wanted to show you there's a diagram of the process. It's similar to what you're talking about, project-based learning. So I just thought that I might just share that with you. That's coming from the Ontario Social Studies curriculum. So I like the ideas there.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And when you take a look at that language, it's what we've talked about, gathering and organising, interpreting and analysing, formulating questions, communicating, evaluating and drawing conclusions. Yeah, brilliant. And I think I love the fact that it's cogs, because that one won't work without the others. And I think it's that idea of the iterative process where it's not necessarily a straight linear journey. A really common feature of that project-based learning and authentic assessment piece is the idea of what you want to achieve, and then you funnel down to a solution across the time. So you actually, I think that's a terrific example, and thank you very much for sharing it. Now, I know we're at time, so if there are any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm just going to click through last couple of slides. Look, I will share the slide deck. It will be made available on the Adobe Express Wednesday Webinars website. But these are tools that are used out in an industry context. So again, if you're thinking about how you might go in and employ them in an education setting, these are some of the ways that they might be used. So using that as a sort of a starting point to think about that authentic sort of assessment piece. I've got a link to all of the resources that I've gone in and used to go in and pull this little presentation together. The next Wednesday webinar is not actually on a Wednesday, it is on a Thursday, and it is a creator session that is run by some of our Adobe Creative Educator leaders. So check the website, the adobe.ly eduwedwebinars.25 if you want to go to that session next Thursday. The ANZ Adobe for Education site, adobeanzedu.com. Please feel free to go in and check it out. There are lots of K-12 resources. There are more higher ed resources coming every day, but it's also got a link to all of our upcoming engagements and sessions that will be going in and running.
Thank you for being part of this Wednesday webinar from the ANZ Adobe Education team. We hope you found it helpful. While you complete the feedback form via this QR code or link, note that Wednesday webinars are one of a number of free events and resources that we have for teachers as well as for students. More information is available on the ANZ Adobe for Education site, available via adobeanzedu.com. If you haven't yet joined the Adobe Creative Educator ACE community by completing ACE Level 1 or 2, you can find out more via adobe.ly/ace-apac. Also, keep up to date with our monthly newsletter via adobeapacedu.com. Thanks again for being involved in this webinar. We look forward to seeing you at the next event. Keep being creative.
Thank you, everyone. Look, if you could please fill in that feedback form, grab your phone out and go in and put in the code. We're currently in the process of planning out our Wednesday webinar series for term 2 and onwards. if there are specific things that you would like us to be going in and running through, whether it be something like a worked example or whether it be an opportunity to go in and share your own practice, please feel free to reach out to us. There is a field in the feedback form where you can go in and make those suggestions. I would strongly encourage, particularly if you're in that K-12 space, take advantage of the fact that you've got access to Adobe Express, have a play with it. It is seriously a simple bit of technology to go in and have a play with. When you go in and jump in there, if you need to know how to do anything and you're not sure how to do it, in the K-12 space, you've actually got a lot of guided activities that you can go in and go through. And there's also in the home screen this little light bulb that says learn, and the learn options there are literally hundreds and hundreds of videos that go from 20 seconds to about 2 or 3 minutes that will go in and step you through any process that you need. There are new features coming in the K-12 space, including a chatbot that will go in and assist you. That's coming shortly, as well as I said, all of that sort of guided support. Have a play, have a bit of fun with it, and please stay in touch with us. And if you do have any questions, always here to help. I'm going to stop the recording now, but if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out. If you want to chat now, please feel free to reach out. Tim, thank you so much for your time. I know that it's closing in on 2 a.m., so please make sure that you get some sleep. And thank you again for sharing that resource. Here we go. My grade 6 students' preferred presentation mode is Adobe Express web pages and presentations. They're both brilliant. I love web pages because of the portability, because of the fact that it's really easy to go in and add to that, and the fact that they look so great on mobile phone. I know that from a K-12 perspective, that's not an incredibly important thing, but from a higher education perspective, we use Adobe Express on mobile a lot as a way of engaging students with a tool that normally is going to distract them from the education process, making it into an actual learning and teaching tool that's going to help them with their coursework. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. As I said, I'm going to go in and finish the recording now. But thank you again for being so patient with me and my fortnight impaired internet connection. So thank you, everyone. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of Wednesday, or in Tim, your case, your Wednesday is just beginning. So have a good sleep, and I hope your Wednesday is wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, Al. I really enjoyed it. One suggestion is infographics. I think that's a good way to go from where you left off to go into infographics. So I think that's it's an ideal choice for a presentation.
Absolutely, and I think you're right there, Tim. It's certainly one that we can cover off on in a Wednesday webinar, because infographics are such a great way to go in and really compress all of that learning into a particular category. Paula said, "How do you think that Adobe Express can be used as a learning media for children with special needs?" Look, Paula, it's a fantastic one, because you've got all of those templates and things that you can use as a starting point. So again, it's not that idea that you necessarily need to be going in and creating a lot of content. The generative AI features that are built in there, where students, if they're not necessarily feeling confident about going in and creating their own stuff, you can use generative AI to actually go in and create images for you, which is, again, a really useful thing. The generative AI that we build in is safe for schools. So it's based on only Adobe stock and Creative Commons licensed material. So it means that you're not going to get in trouble with any sort of copyright infringement. It means that you can't go in and say, make me a picture of Batman fighting Spider-Man. It's not going to go in and create that. And that's a good thing, because it means that students are starting to realise that digital content does have provenance. It is important to know where these things sort of come from. But yeah, look, the other great thing is that you've got the ability to go in and add transcripts to videos if you need to. If students are shy about being on camera, or you've got privacy concerns around that, you can go in and use things like Character Animator to go in and voice, give those students a voice. And it's a little bit of fun going in and having an animated character on the screen. But it's a really powerful tool. And I think the nice thing about it is that everything inside of Express is easy to go in and use, and it's easy to go in and learn how to do it. So if you're going in and teaching students, they can follow those little snippet videos. They can go in and follow that process and actually have that demonstration video open on the screen at the same time as they're working. It's also great if they're going in and looking at doing collaborative projects. So you might go in and have multiple students on a page if they're doing a sort of a brainstorm, or if they're coming up with some different ideas. And it's, from an educator perspective, it can be quite wonderful to go in and see all the little cursors flying around on the screen, seeing what people are doing. So look, I think that ease of use is very much first and foremost. Unlike a lot of our sort of professional level tools like an InDesign or a Photoshop, you'll notice that the interface is very pared back. You've got simple basic navigation where if you want to go in and publish, that's sitting up in the top right. Sitting down over on the left, you've got your ability to go in and access your content. We didn't really go into looking at stuff like projects or libraries, but again, they're a great way to go in and share resources within either teaching teams or within class settings. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I'm going to go now because I've now gone 8 minutes over, and that's very naughty of me. But thank you so much for staying with me for the journey. I look forward to seeing you all again at some stage later on this year. And again, as I said, have a wonderful rest of Wednesday.